Today's marriage habit: confess to one another. The devotional is from James 5:16. Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. I think this is one of the hardest of habits, but it can bring great healing. And it is confessing to each other areas of trespass or offense you have done against each other. And it sounds terribly crazy. Anything confessional, except unless you've built up this muscle as a Christian, it can be really hard. It is so much easier to keep all those offenses to yourself and in the darkness. And especially if the relationship, the marriage is on ill footing or the levels of maturity aren't there, there's huge risk that even confessing will bring more shame, blame, and condemnation from your spouse. And so this is one that's very hard, but it can lead to healing. One of the cautions is to make sure that you both come into it together, and there might be a lot of hurt kind of coming into this. So one example is you have a confession, and the person, your spouse, feels, oh, you didn't really truly fully confess, and it becomes this thing. And I think that's something to work out over time. That maybe you do realize God searches your heart. You continue to read and pray, or maybe you actually have a full-on conversation at another time. The reason why I think a confession is powerful is that because, as the verse says, it's to express a trespass, and a trespass is a crossing of a boundary. And so here's one of the things that can be a little bit tricky is expecting a confession for a boundary that somebody doesn't know. The purpose of this is someone searches themselves for what we agree are common boundaries that we should all know without being explicitly told. So one framework is criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and defensiveness when you're not reacting to a criticism or contempt. Someone's just expressing something plainly, truthfully, not in attack mode, and then you immediately get defensive. So I'm going to talk about how to do this. There's so much that can be involved in confessing, but in the 1 hour or the 1 minute preparation as you hit this devotional is to just ask yourself quickly these questions. Have you judged your spouse for an unexpressed expectation? So you've held an expectation, that person hasn't abided by it, hasn't met it, and so you're now judging and carrying that around. That's just as important as these very visible violations of boundaries. Have you spoken in a tone or with an intent that conveys criticism to tear down the person? Have you spoken in a tone or with intent to convey contempt, your dissatisfaction or judgment with a person? Have you acted in ways that stonewall, either by actual action, walking away, closing the door, or in the way you communicate? You just shut down, and your manner of speaking is intended to shut down the conversation. And have you, in the face of a legitimate request that's not expressing criticism or contempt, been defensive? So after you spend some time reflecting on this, then I think you then want to confess to each other. And confession is super hard. And so I laid out a template to give you as a starter, but the more vulnerable, more honest you can be, then the stronger the relationship can be. But mine is, I confess that when I, and you fill in the action, did X, Y, Z, treated you with contempt, raised my voice at you, criticized you by saying such and such, that was not good for our marriage. Please pray with me for us to be healed of the hurt and for me to heal of my sinfulness that caused this. So pretty objective, trying to make it easy to dig into this. Okay, so hopefully that helps. And then to pray, you kind of confess it, and they say, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And say, okay, after you've gone through the n number of confessions you want to make, that covers maybe the last 40 days. You want to thank God for giving courage and grace for both of you to confess, and then pray to be healed from the source of this trespassing, and then pray that the marriage can be healed from the trespass. I think it's actually a very powerful practice as part of this marriage devotional, because it really is an often overlooked part of our relationship with Jesus, because he himself, when we confess our sinfulness and then we declare faith to place all of our trust in him, then we are healed as well. Death is the thing we've been healed from. And when I read scripture often, these healings, these medical miracles, while they can also be taken at face value, to me, they're pointing to the ultimate healing, which is from death. And so such is the power that Jesus has. And I think we can have a similar power in our own families. So if you want to read the verse, you want to read a little bit more about this devotional, you can go to the podcast notes and click from there to find out more. Till the next time. Thanks. Bye now.